Today's guest is a creative force who moves seamlessly through music, technology, and media. He's a Grammy Award winner with RIAA multi platinum and gold credits, a founder, an innovator, and a father, storyteller who uses culture as a tool for transformation. With more than 15 years in the music and creative industry, he's collaborated with major artists, brands, earned Webby Award nominations, and even took part in Apple's Entrepreneurs Camp. His work lives at the intersection of purpose and artistry, blending culture, innovation, and impact like few others can. Everybody, please welcome to Whiskey Soured, Dave Giles the second.
Hey, yes, yes, yes. Nailed the pronunciation. Nailed the suffix. That was quite a joyous introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. This has been a long time coming, and I am so
Absolutely.
excited to have you here. How are you?
Oh, I'm decent. I'm decent. Couldn't be better to be frankly honest. There's a lot of really good momentum and progress that are, just happening kind of across my creative endeavors, and I think I know, long-winded answer. I think,
Take your
as a
time, baby.
parent,
Take your
yeah,
time.
as a parent, as a partner, all of those things, it's kind of a continuous balancing act, and art to the juggle, so to speak. And
Yeah,
I would say that this particular season is one in which I feel like I've got my hands on the ball. So
love it. I love that. So, kind of take us on your journey into the musical space because you have a background in tech and marketing, all this stuff, right? So
absolutely.
when did you know? Like, did something happen when you were a kid? Because some people kind of like, oh, I kind of touched it when I was a kid, but what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so there's a number of these kind of first contact moments. I'll take kind of one of the funniest ones for me was roughly around, I guess, if I had to guess how old I am in this particular memory, I want to say let's go for seven, maybe. Seven, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna say seven. And New Jack City is out at the time. I've somehow got in my cassette collection, my growing cassette collection, Turtles soundtrack, um, Michael Jackson Dangerous. What else is in there? I'm sneaking my sister's Dr. Dre The Chronic. I'm sneaking a few other tapes in there. Tupacalypse is in our household. So, a number of things like that. But in particular, I had fallen in love with this the New Jack City soundtrack. The movie itself, I thought was dope at that time, and I don't know what it was about that soundtrack, but again, just maybe it's the magic of the '90s,
Mhm.
hip hop and R&B soundtrack. And now we know that these were kind of pet projects of, or pet creative projects of, some of these burgeoning labels at that time, where these are kind of showcase moments for those labels. But as a kid, it's just music, right? But in particular, New Jack Hustler by Ice-T might have been, other than Ninja Rap, might have been the first rap that I memorized. And so I'm, like I said, six or seven, something like that. Oh my God, my kids, 6, 7. And I'm jumping on the bed, and it's after school. My sister's home. She's about 8 years older than me. And so I'm jumping on the bed, thinking nobody's paying attention, and I'm rapping word for word this Ice-T verse. And I'm just going in with all of the, just dropping all the MFs and this and that, every 4 or 5 letter words you can think of. I'm just trying to get it off as well as I can. And she just kind of peeks in, like busting the door real fast, like, "Ooh, what you here talking about?" And I like drop on the bed real fast, like like you got shot or something. I'm just like, just shocked and embarrassed and mad and crying and don't tell mom. She tells, and I get yeah, I get dealt with that evening. Definitely get told about myself, but it ends up being more of a joke and one of these things that kind of just gets brought up throughout the years as just a really funny moment. But I bring that particular one, I think, to mention because or to mind because one of the things that I think I learned in that moment, didn't realize it until maybe 30 years later on a stage on in the Adriatic with folks who don't speak English primarily,
Hmm.
and the way that they still connecting to every word that I'm saying. I mean, what was I, a 7-year old? Granted, I'm on the south side of Chicago and I've seen all kinds of stuff, but I still don't fully grasp what Ice T is, is spitting on there. But something about the way it felt, the cool of it, the cadence, the all of it, the delivery, was just magical for me. And so that's one of those early moments. Beyond that, parents always had an amazing record collection. My dad was one of these people who, both my parents are kind of, historians of their music, so to speak. But, particularly I'll credit my dad as being somebody who, you know, he would hear records that I'm playing and my just kind of around my friends or whatever, and then would go and pull up the record that is sampled and would play it for me. And so I'm kind of having that, not even just the, oh, this is from that, but I'm seeing the vinyl. He's playing it for me, and I'm kind of getting the crackle of the record and all of that experience. So just a very organic kind of connection, to music. It was always, like I said, always playing either in the car or in the household. I would say middle school was probably when I decided, like, okay, I, I, I think I can rap. I'm gonna try and rap. So, lunchroom, battles and, freestyling in the cafeteria, beating on the tables and things like that. In middle school, shout out to some of the guys that were definitely on that journey with me. So, of course, see everything, formerly the Paxtons, my guy Suleiman, cool for a living out there in Austin, Texas. But yeah, we were just having fun and just kind of figuring it out in middle school. And I have a god brother, Sid, who, he and his boys were actually, to me, I thought they were the coolest. Like, had all the bars, got all the girls, had the fashion, all of that. And so, I would kind of be a fly on the wall in their ciphers and in their, sessions. And he was probably the first person that I would say heard what was in my notebooks or caught me around my friends doing my thing and said, "No, I think you actually like you're doing something that's different," and kind of poured into me and gave me tapes and gave me, try this, do this, listen to this, and yeah. So a mixed bag again of just kind of familial influence, but those are some of the kind of touch points of that really made it something worth pursuing, I think, to me.
So, how did you end up more into like the art space? And because, I mean, though art and music, do coexist together, they
Hmm.
inspire both, right? But how was that where it was like art, tech? How did you blend all of that together when it comes to like production, sounds, all that stuff? Where do you draw also like where do you draw influence from
Hmm.
sometimes when it comes to that creative process?
Yeah, no, excellent question. Thank you for asking. I'm gonna say that it was a mixture of the the conditions of my blackness and also a little bit of neurodivergence. Thrown in there to boot, or autism, as the kids like to joke these days, which is crazy. But uh, the reality of it is, again, music definitely had my heart. And it's something that kind of, I was passionate about. I would sit there making stop tapes. I know everybody remembers a stop tape where you recorded your favorite songs off the radio and made your own little mixtapes from
Mhm.
that. Um, or would just burn through a cassette because I wanted to learn the lyrics and I got to rewind the tape to write it down and get it right. So that kind of hyper focus around music was there. But shout out to my parents. They always, regardless of our situation, made a way to facilitate me exploring other facets of my creativity. So, I had what now we would consider, I guess, like a subscription,
Yeah.
but it was a comic book store. And it was
Okay.
my mom worked downtown Chicago. She was a banker. And right across at one point, across from the Sears Tower, whatever y'all call it now. We ain't, I don't know nothing about that. But right across from the Sears Tower, there's a comic shop in the basement. And yeah, like once a month when, we were going to pick my mom up from work, I would get a trip down to the basement to go pick up like a shoebox basically of comic titles that they were holding for me, and so little stuff like that um, kind of gave me that space to draw and to create costumes and to just do all of these different things, and in the midst of a lot of, like I said, very very traditional kind of hood tropes that were going on around me, and kind of masculinity, tropes that definitely ruled the day. I never got looked at crazy for making an entire costume from scratch of a Street Fighter character and walking around as in cosplay, in our little apartment on a Sunday. I never got fried for that, and so I just think that that space, definitely kind of opened up all of those possibilities. But to get more granular, high school, I went to a school called Kenwood Academy. So, our probably most notorious alum would be Robert, but we don't claim him like that. But you got folks like the Brat, you got folks like Lisa Ray, you got Shaka Khan,
Okay.
modern, folks that I can think of right now. You got folks like Nez, who produced for Schoolboy Q on his,
Uh,
Grammy nominated project. And you got Rachel Robinson, who's singing on the Chance album right now. So a school that really facilitated, again, just a lot of creativity amongst black children. And so I got the ability at one point to learn Photoshop by being a darkroom volunteer while
okay.
taking photography classes. And so in that process, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I can make the covers to my mixtapes through, by learning how to do this.
Yes.
And if I get really good at this photography thing, I can, come up with the imagery for, all these different things. And so there became a point where in high school, when I started to kind of figure out, and this is the kind of time this all, high school for me is 99 to 2002 or 98 to 2002, something like that.
Okay.
So this is a time that is the internet is here, but internet entrepreneurs per se aren't really a thing, quite yet. But all of the entertainment, it's kind of in that bridge right before things go fully digital, but where technology has taken us to some different places. And so, I was in a state of needed money to do the things that I wanted to do creatively, but also needed money because I couldn't expect or ask for certain, things from my folks, and wanted to, still be able to look good, move around the city, and do things a certain way. And so I shout out to University of Chicago, bookstore. Hopefully, there's a statute on this, in there somewhere. But I used to borrow without giving back books about web development. And so you remember those old books like web design for dummies or HTML for
Hmm.
dummies, that kind of thing. I would take those and go and sit in a little coffee shop up the street basically, and I would liberate it from the store, go sit in the coffee shop up the street and study and teach myself basic programming skills to get my Black Planet page looking good. Eventually, I'm able to build very basic sites for like the DJs in the neighborhood that a lot of the stuff was happening around. For us, it was Hyde Park. And so there was a record pool. That's an old concept for some folks, but just to kind of break it down simply, that's where one guy, one sister, whatever, is so cool with the music industry contacts that they're able to get early early records, as in vinyl records of new singles or street records, whatever it is that people at labels are trying out. They get early copies of them, and then they come to a group of influential DJs, and they're like, "Yo, I got all the new stuff that y'all need." Again, kind of these early subscription services, right? And you know, give them out to DJs. Those DJs kind of influenced by playing them out in their own settings, putting them on mixtapes, whatever it is. And then that person kind of holds the cultural cachet. And so for me in Hyde Park, it was a guy who went by Humble Quest. I basically kind of worked my way into being Humble Quest's like t-shirt guy and flyer guy occasionally, website stuff, all of that. And just got my little independent digital hustle on at like 16, 17 years old, to teach myself how to get my music out there, but also to just have cash flow and to be able to, do things. And so that was really where the seed was planted. And there's a few different iterations of kind of what was the priority, over the years that would come when I went to college in St. Louis and Washington University. Initially, yeah, 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 of course, it's STL is a second home, you know what I'm saying? So you already know what that's about. But yeah, the pushing my music on campus, and kind of going around battling in the Central West End with DJ Trackstar, now Run the Jewels, um, hosting college radio on K-Word, you know what I mean, things like that. So some these different things kind of took precedent as I was kind of figuring out, what mattered, but all those skill sets were intermingled the whole way. And I would say it wasn't until I guess late 20s, now live at this point living on the East Coast, trying to figure it out in New York City and really make that push, about say like 24, 25.
Mhm.
Really trying to make that push into, independent rap and just kind of find my way. And what I realized was in that setting, I was like, okay, you already know how this goes. Like I couldn't get, a job at the regular retail streetwear spot because my degree and, other stuff that was going on. They're like, nah, you're not, you know, you got too much going on over here. Like you can't come over here.
Overqualified, as
You
Duran
know,
used to say.
exactly, exactly. So, one of those situations, and I start, eventually people are like, hey, if you could be the flyer guy, or if you're doing design stuff for us, or this kind of thing, you can build a portfolio and get some, it's New York, like you can get work as a designer if you just figure out how to kind of organize yourself. And so around that time, that's when I first started to kind of see the vision of like, oh, okay, I can really bring all of these things together. My understanding for marketing, my understanding for these creative assets, my understanding for digital, for social, and do that independently, again, to stay afloat, survive in New York. But then, of course, also through that process, meet the other people and peers and colleagues and connections that would eventually become, my music network, and that, now 20 years later serves me in a very different kind of way than, what it did when I was just trying to figure it out. So that was kind of the nucleus of that. And that journey of, being able to toe that fine line of trying to stay fresh and kind of on the cusp of what's happening in real time in the creative communities, and kind of having that shape my work, but also being experienced enough in institutional settings, academic settings, and corporate settings to be able to get in there with like a brand like Essence after kind of building up my portfolio and things of that sort. And what I found was that I was able to establish a niche of being able to work in these kind of digital digital and tech kind of hybrid roles with Black institutions. So Essence, most notably for over 5 years, but Ebony, Cassius, I'm just kind of thinking of a number of them that I've been able to kind of work with them to varying degree. Oh, okay, player, okay, Africa, for a time, so yeah, just kind of finding that niche, with brands and institutions that are definitely for us and by us in that regard. And that in itself has been a blessing because it somehow always still tied back into the pursuit and the passion around music as well. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like that's a lot to even think about and process, even as I'm speaking to you. Because I was like, man, no, because seriously, you're like, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to make this work. And was there ever a moment where you was like, okay, I'm at that break? And we all get to that point where it's kind of like you feel like you're about to be broken into pieces,
hmm
so you're really being planted. What was that like? Did you ever have a moment like that on this
yeah,
journey where it was like, okay, let me take a step back. I'm overthinking this.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
proceed to push forward because I know what's on the other side.
Many times there, you know, many times that kind of come to mind. And I don't necessarily want to kind of go down the rabbit hole of all of them, but I can think of I think again, earlier I used the phrase like the conditions of my blackness, right? And that
Mhm.
really just is to speak to the notion that in some of our situations, right, there's a lack of resources, or there's a lack of
Right.
kind of infrastructure that you have to do certain things and pursue certain things. And so um, I would say that, there are some things that were kind of some pivotal moments, right? One in particular that jumps out to me, this was around after my father had passed, and I'm, like I said, about 24, like I said, living in New York,
Okay.
and my mom is at home and she's navigating her own, um, you know, processing of that, and to some pretty serious extent. And I am basically, doing my thing as a still as an independent designer. Hadn't at this point got any like contracts or staff, kind of major staffing situations yet, and kind of breakthroughs on that level. But I am putting out records, and I am touring independently, and playing, festivals, South by Southwest and CMJ, um, playing college campuses, things of that sort, all bootstrapping. And I'm on the phone with my mom one day, and she's like, "When are you going to stop playing? And, in so many words, come home and pick up the slack." And I remember being so hurt by the choice of the words playing,
Mhm.
right? Now we know, as Black Mama, playing could, that's of course, right? I ain't
Yeah,
one of your little friends, all that kind of stuff, right?
yeah,
So I'm like, okay, I get where this could be coming from, but it still feels like you're trivializing my pursuit. Now, what this was bumping up against in my soul was that, there was a period where when I was living in St. Louis, and my father he had been chronically ill since I was 9. So we kind of went through these fits and starts of, um, you know, is this it? Is this, oh, okay? No, we're good. Oh, is this it? Okay, no, we're good. And so that's a cadence and a rhythm that I have been through most of, kind of my formative years up until that point. And so towards the end of my time in St. Louis, I was planning on coming, basically, leaving school and um, coming home to just try and figure things out, but really to support him, because I was like, he needs as much help as he can get, and mom is doing what she can, but yeah, I'm gonna. And one of the things he said to me, and it was one of the last conversations that we had, a great extent before he passed, was, I didn't do all the things that I've done, and I haven't made the sacrifices that I've made for you to put all that to the side and come
yeah,
worry about me. Like, what my time that I'm here for is my time that I'm here for, and you are, the legacy of that. So don't stop that on behalf of me, or I'm gonna be pissed. At that point, that would actually be letting me down if you stop your motion, to come over here and which I gotta say, we talk about the black tax and all that kind of stuff, and just really the way that we handle these things in all of our families, and a lot of non-white families, right?
yeah,
That kind of understanding of, you gotta, it's a cycle of caring for your parents, care for you, you care for them, and then so on and so forth. That was revolutionary and like radical to me. And her words bumped up against that in a
yeah,
way that, I'm like, oh, now hold on, like, this is actually, even though he's transitioned, this is exactly what he told me not to do.
exactly.
And in a weird way, to say, it was like weird to say this, because again, my parents were always together while my dad was here, but that was like I'm gonna take dad's advice.
Yeah,
And in a lot of ways, I'll admit it, right? I was like, I'm gonna achieve in spite of, right? You kind of had that, like, I'm gonna prove it now because you thought I was playing. So I absolutely was in a moment where I really didn't have the answers, but definitely just had felt momentum and conviction. That was a moment of, okay, no, I'm gonna double down and I'm gonna figure this out, because what this is now telling me is that I'm really in this on my own, in a lot of ways. Had friends, had partners, had colleagues, but like, ultimately, kind of my backbone in this is not there. And so,
yeah,
yeah, I got to figure this thing out now. Like, this is fuel. So, That definitely was a that's a big turning point. I would say another one of these moments where you just kind of have to assess and figure things out. To be honest, I would say coming into winning the Grammy. Um, because at that point, I had been working in tech out here in Los Angeles. I had, moved in 2019. Pandemic is happening, and had to, kind of regroup and figure out how to fit all my skill sets into what's going on in LA. And I landed in a setting where, shout out to, mentor, now my advisor, chameleonaire, brilliant dude, one of the most brilliant dudes that I've ever had the luxury of being able, to learn from or any of that. But he took a really big chance on me and brought me in to design and manage products for his software companies. And that experience taught me, I feel like 75% of what I'm utilizing now,
Mhm.
and kind of how I'm looking at the world and the kind of pursuits that I'm endeavoring upon in this, and also definitely confirmed or affirmed a lot of what I brought and kind of have learned on my own journey as well. But, as the nature of things in Silicon Valley, there was a crash, Silicon Valley bank crash. Some folks may remember it in 2023, and that impacted our runway, the projects that we were working on. And so at the same time that I was now at this point, because we've kind of jumped ahead in the story a bit, but co-written and produced on Beyonce's Renaissance, and was basically up for a Grammy. Basically, was nominated for multiple Grammys in that moment. I'm
Yeah.
looking at this pipeline of, okay, or this runway of, I don't know what's going to happen with this tech job anymore, but that had me existing and thriving really in a certain kind of space and capacity. I have this concept for a publishing company that I've had for a time, but it's not the main priority because music career, tech job, or taking the lion's share of it, and everything else is kind of, you're just kind of building it up in a silo. And in that moment where I didn't necessarily know what was going to happen, I knew that there are these moments in life where you get all the fighting and all of the pushing uphill and all of the proving and all that kind of stuff. Every now and then, that preparation meets opportunity and
Mhm.
magic happens.
Yes.
And I was in a season of that sort, and I knew that I had to, I could kind of sit around and just try and figure out what to make of the tech fallout, and which, and granted, I absolutely kind of clung to that world as tightly as I could. But what you start to find is that you know how you see yourself becomes how the world sees you.
Ah, yeah.
And some of the things that the things that you do to survive, that play dress up in, or kind of roles that you take on to make things work. At some point, people see you and say, like, as what happened to me, people would say, man, this resume is fantastic, or you look great on paper and all of these different things, and you have such an understanding of what we do, but I can't see why you would come here if you have a Grammy.
Yeah.
And I
It's one of those moments where it's like full circle, right?
yeah,
Where you're forced into where you're supposed to be. And that's just how the universe, that's how God works all the time. Like everything is temporary, and what you are supposed to be, who you are supposed to be, will always stick and will always land.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I want
And
to,
yeah,
before we dive into everything,
yeah.
I want to go back to when you were talking about your mom and experiencing grief, and then having her kind of push back at you, which kind of, our parents are from a generation where they stayed at jobs for 20 and 30 and 40 years until they
Mhm.
retired. And so our realm of creativity and being able to finance our lives through our creativity is still kind of foreign to them. I've experienced that. You've experienced that. We've all, all as creators have experienced that. But what was that journey like, or that conversation? Did you ever talk to your mom when she said those harsh words to you, you know, because it pierced you.
Right.
So what was that like? And then to jump ahead so many years and have a, you know, win that Grammy, what's the interaction like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I can't remember if in that moment, I gave her kind of the rawness of what I felt, but I know that I definitely spoke and moved with a defiant tone for some time,
Mm,
to follow that. Not too long after that, I went into my first uh, first version of parenthood.
mhm.
And so, you know, there were a lot of, I guess, unconventional things that were, from a again traditional boomer POV, a lot of unconventional things that were kind of coming down the pipeline in my life, and so there was a definitely a season where absolutely shout out to my wife Jahan and just the support of her and of other people in my village who really understood who I am and who I was trying to become. Um, it was very easy to just to kind of take the road of okay, we all we got. We're gonna bootstrap these things and we're gonna figure them out to the best of our ability and in spite of right. And so that was a spirit that I moved in for a time. And I would say we had the first kind of confrontational conversation, so to speak, actually around my wedding. Where and it wasn't necessarily about that topic. It was more so just letting my mom know, like, hey, um, there are a lot of things that you have said or that have been, you've kind of expressed even in now in your understanding of my upbringing and or just where we are to this day that at times when we feel like, you weren't supportive or like you even if not necessarily supportive because they can't support everything, right? But um, that I was, doing this alone, and that was just going to be what it had to be. And some of the stuff was harmful, and this is how I felt about it. But at the same time, I understand a bit more now. Through at this time, parenthood is a new thing for me, and so I'm like I understood a little bit more about what that perspective is and I'm again still that journey is something that I've kind of where I land on the spectrum of what was right, what was wrong, or what could have been done better. It slides around all the time because of the deeper that I go into the journey of parenting and kind of what those sacrifices are like, those things you can see and you can't see, for your children and so on. And so a lot of grace that I started to develop there, but I absolutely had to have that moment of saying, this hurt and I didn't feel supported, and I, definitely felt like I was doing these things to working to prove myself to you, or kind of almost in defiance of you, as opposed to just trying to be the best that I can be at what I'm trying to be. And so that was a journey, that it took for us to kind of that we started around that time to, get things to back to a healthier place. And it's to be honest, she has been now to bring it full circle, in the years since, and now, going fully headfirst into really leading the way and trying to absolutely blaze trails with Waves Manufacturing and Publishing Company and kind of all of the different offshoots of music business that I'm involved in at this moment and of entrepreneurship that I'm involved in. She has been such an ardent supporter and advocate, cheerleader. Here's some money for the the kids cash app and some gas money because I just because I feel like it today. That kind of you know to where I can tell her, hey, here's something cool that just happened that did not absolutely net our business anything, but infrastructurally, this partnership is going to unlock, unparalleled visibility into accounting on behalf of all of our artists that, is going to be really exciting for years to come. And from her banking background, she's like, that's exactly what I wanted for you. And, I've been able to, I'm seeing some of the pain points that you have in building this thing. And that's the kind of thing that I wanted you to unlock. And I'm really excited about that. So we have been able to come full circle, I think, through
Love
that
it.
process of, definitely her navigating her grief and kind of presenting it the way that she did. Me taking it, processing it, the different ways that I had to, and giving it back to her and letting her know, hey, this is my boundary here, and this is what
Yeah.
was cool and what wasn't. And then us over time, and just through me getting to know more of what shoes that she and my father were in with raising me,
Yeah.
and through my own journey in parenthood and partnership. Uh, into getting to a place where I'm back out on the limb and, really building something, again, truly from scratch, but definitely rooted in 20 years of, career and foundation and experience. Her support and that journey has been, priceless, and just, yeah, it's definitely kind of feels like a fairy tale in terms of how that comes around. I'll give one little funny anecdote about the moment that she found out about working with Beyonce. So I did a pretty damn good job of basically keeping this between, my manager knew, my co-founder, Daryl Garrett knew, my wife knew. That was it. I was playing this, with my
You sure?
kids.
Because talking low key.
Oh.
They was talking, so we kind of knew what was up, but nobody would say exactly who. But then when you start looking at who's connected and connecting the dots, I was like, oh, okay, we know.
Right.
And they couldn't hold water, by the way. You ask the right questions, you're gonna ultimately get the answers. So,
I think I just lost your audio, Dom. I'm sorry.
so you thought we didn't know, but the streets were talking, and everybody, was saying certain things, but couldn't say who. But then once you start connecting the dots, and like, okay, who we follow, who we have in common, and you start piecing it together, and you're like, oh yeah, I think it's so and so, but everybody's talking, but not saying
Yeah.
it. I'm like, okay. My friend is working with Beyonce. I know that it is going to be disco ballroom inspired, which
Yep.
also sidebar. By the way, before we get into Beyonce, I want to say
Yeah.
your inner child is very happy for speaking
Yes.
up and advocating for yourself.
Yes.
I've been
Yes.
in your shoes and I know what that's like. And it is, I mean, after that, my mom and I, also she medicated now.
Right.
So
That's
great
big.
relationship now. And
That's
I
big.
enjoy it. I enjoy spending time with my mom.
Yep.
Like I feel like I'm a kid again and I'm so happy to be
Yep.
back in this space. But
Yep.
you have worked with so many different people in the industry, and we are several years now removed
Hmm.
from the great project called Renaissance as won by
Absolutely.
Beyonce. Can we get into it just a little bit and talk about this?
So for this, I will just say all praise is due to Honey Dijon. For those who do
Okay.
not know,
Mhm.
a amazing producer, DJ, icon of fashion, and absolute maven and icon within the queer community, global, international. Again, if you don't know, you got to catch up right now. She has a new single out with Chloe Bailey called The Nightlife. New project coming out called Welcome to the Moon. Without going too deep in it, we co-wrote a good chunk of this album, and yeah, definitely taking things further, than we have in the past, and so, but you know, I've been able to work with Honey through good relationship with producers Luke Solomon and Chris Penny. Luke is the A&R who first found my music as Dave and Sam, and literally hopped on a flight from London and came to Brooklyn and sat in Sam's living room and listened to our demos.
Wow.
Old school, like the way that you always kind of dream it happens.
Wow.
Um, he had messages sitting in our SoundCloud DM for 3 months because we didn't take ourselves seriously enough to think that anybody would be DM in our SoundCloud.
Wow. Wow. I didn't
So
know SoundCloud had DM, so that's
yes,
a
yes. So, again, just these moments when you realize that something is for you, because that didn't have to happen for us. That could have
yeah.
just came and went. But on that journey of us signing our, again, this concept of fusing house with hip hop and R&B, which sounds silly because the foundations of house absolutely involved hip hop and R&B and gospel and disco and all of these things kind of in this melting pot. But when something goes big and goes global and kind of takes all of these different offshoots, it becomes a lot of different things. And so we had this idea to be really intentional about kind of bringing that fusion back together, but trying to do it in a way that we felt was cool and not derivative or not, you know, uh, there's a term again, but cosplay, right? Um, and so Luke got it. He understood it. And while he signs us to Defected Records, which at the time is the largest dance, existed as the largest dance label, I guess, in the world. And definitely one of the largest dance indies there is, or largest indies there is. And so we signed with them. And while developing our project over the next 3 years, they brought me in to, write for different producers on that label. And to gradually, I got to kind of start building a rapport with, Honey Dijon's team. And so there comes a point where I am, thinking that I'm writing, and really taking a certain level of pride and kind of excitement and joy into this, getting out of the space, the long time career space of writing from my POV, and then, kind of hoping that it translates to somebody else, or kind of writing generalist ideas to writing for Honey's POV very intentionally, and kind of really immersing myself in that as best as possible, which again, there are clearly some things that are not you know, not necessarily, one-to-one fits, but I think at the end of the day, the connection for me is, making beautiful, resilient, vibrant, joyous, and thoughtful music from that shared, Southside Chicago upbringing, but also just a place of, coming from the voice of the oppressed, bringing light to the entire culture. And also in this role, as a cishet male, I've just always believed that, I have a responsibility, to prioritize, to advocate, to protect my sisters, my trans sisters, my queer family, all of it, because there's a certain level of privilege that I have, just a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit. And so with that, that assignment was something that I took great pride in. And so, to kind of go on that journey, thinking that it's going to be one thing, or assuming that it's for one thing, and then find out that, there's a really beautiful relationship that it's, formed between Honey Dijon and, Beyonce's creative director. I'm gonna always mess up the name, but Amakdasi. Actually cut that because I know that sounds terrible. A really great relationship is brewing between Honey Dijon and Beyonce's creative director. And
I'm
as a
laughing at because we not perfect over here.
fair enough, fair enough,
You
fair
know,
enough.
I'm like, hey, nobody asked you to be perfect. We asked you just to show up and show up as yourself.
That's real. That's real. But yeah, they've got a bond, and and that um, there the ideas formed that a lot of what we were building for Honey's project becomes inspiration now, and kind of source code for this larger vision of Renaissance.
Yeah.
And the alignment is there, of course, like I said, because you've got the queer community connection, you've got the Chicago connection, you've got the again, Honey goes back to the warehouse, and so that just very real connection to the culture. We're able to tap in and create something really organic. And so for me, what that looked like was, getting a call one day while I'm in Chicago, and it's just like, hey, I can't say the who, the what, or the where, but just know that the greatest of all time heard these records that we worked on and loves them, and was like dancing and really getting to it. And so And it took me a while. I'm like, the great, because when you say the greatest, there's only one person I'm thinking of. So are we talking about the same person? Because Beehive security of the world, correct? And so yeah, I just once we were on affirmed that we were on the same page, the answer, the mission was simple. You got 72 hours, because we got to go back in, with some of these notes. You got 72 hours to get it done. And so
Wow.
shout out to my wife. She was like, all right, we'll take these kids, we about to just go have activities and do things. Don't come out of that studio until
Got it done.
until you've done what needs to be done. So
Yes.
that was something that, again, just walking in that purpose, right? Believing at one point, hey, this idea of this fusion, this sound, that idea came to us in 2011 or 2012, and we pushed it as far as we could, and independently until the label picked it up. Went that route as far as you could, until the right collaborations come from just building this kind of catalog of music with this vision in mind, and for the greatest of all time to catch up to what you're doing, or vice versa, right? I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't take it lightly. And I also want to credit what I feel like, even though again, me and um, my relationship, really stops at the A&R level with Parkwood. But when I think about how these things happen, right? I'm a Beyonce fan. I have been since no, no, no.
Yes.
So from that perspective, and then of course, I believe my wife is the biggest Beyonce fan in the world, and so you
We
know,
gonna go neck and neck. I love you.
fair, fair, I
Everybody
get it.
went to like every Cowboy Carter show in LA says I had lost my job, but I would have been right there with you.
I get it, I get it.
No, I'm like, I get it, but I'm gonna let you have it today because of who your husband is. But
Yeah,
okay.
but it just I think, right, it's the nature of all of these things, right? It's ancestral knowledge. I'm downloading so much of B, and downloading so much of J, right? J was my favorite MC growing up, period. And so downloading so much of what they have brought to music, and appreciating it as it's intended to be appreciated, not no caveats, no you know whatever, is to just loving it for what it is. I feel like that DNA absolutely embeds itself in, kind of what I was trying to process, as far as this intentional fusion around hip hop, R&B, and dance. That meets with, again, like I said, that kind of coded DNA from, hours and hours and hours of listening to, B's music. And I feel like, again, opportunity meets preparation, and that's when the magic happens. So, none of it felt coincidental. None of it felt for me like a surprise or a shock in a lot of ways. I guess wild and crazy, yes, but in a weird way, I instantly felt a sense of calm when it all started to come together. Of this makes a whole lot of sense,
Yeah.
and I think the best takeaway from it, of course, outside of now, lifelong royalties and things that will exist beyond me and for my kids, and in that sense, and even of course the foundation of really being able to kind of kick the door in with my publishing company as well, and recruiting other writers from Renaissance, and them being a lot of them being our first signees, to the roster, our first clients, if you will. I know my
Love it.
co-founder hates that term, signees. I think the outside of that larger legacy, I think of this experience, for me, it was the affirmation that
Yeah.
you know what you're doing, and that um, so much of what we are on the internet trying to find, and what we're researching to try and get, and these silver bullets and kind of magic potions that we're looking for to shortcut our success, or just to make sense out of something that is hard to fathom, or hard to grasp, because it's such a one in a million concepts.
Yeah.
um, that gave me the utmost confidence that it's all within you, and it's just a matter of either the moment, the connection, the person, the trigger, if you will, that unlocks all of that. And so I credit, B, and I credit the Renaissance Project for unlocking my, what I consider the beginning of the rest of my life.
Listen, this is the purest form and purest example of trusting the process and understanding God's timing. Because what do they always say? He don't come when you want him, but he always on time. And you talk about,
Absolutely.
oh, this happened actually like 10, 12 years prior. We had to go back. We had to do X, Y, Z. Tell the people which song, because we didn't tell them what song project, but tell the people what song it made it to
All
record.
right. So for the people that do know, this is a reminder. And you see what I did there?
That's him.
And for the people
That's
who
him
don't
right
know, for the people who don't know, I my vocal is on the opening of Cozy, and I pretty much in any rapping that happens on Cozy, I wrote, which is something I take pride in, particularly because outside of the fact of connecting with people and meeting people literally across the world who have shared with me how those words and those verses impacted them and kind of changed their lives in a lot of ways. Again, in my imagination, Hove has to approve, or has to at least like feel really good about anything that B is rapping.
Yeah.
So for Hove to not hear a rap and say, "Nah, scrap that, I got something better," or "Nah, man, you got something better," is one of, outside of serving the Queen, is one of the greatest accomplishments in my lifetime. Because in that, again, this is somebody who I absolutely grew up admiring, and still think is brilliant, one of a kind from a musicianship standpoint. And yeah, it's quite the takeaway. So
I could imagine just the joy that you felt knowing that, like getting that cosign. And
yeah,
I think of, so when we see the track listing, and I'm like, what's Cozy? Like, I dated a Cozy that was like my first love here in St. Louis, right? And so, but then when you hear this, a reminder, and then it just goes into, the sounds, the beats, the
mhm.
acoustics, and everything. And I was like, if I ever did shrooms or any sort of, that's the
Mm,
song, because I could hear but see like what's happening. I'm like, oh, that might be fun, but also just the affirmations
yep.
throughout that song. And as a person that experiences highs and lows sometimes, I have to
Hmm.
throw that song on. That's one of my songs that I throw on and just hype myself up to get back to my baseline, to push forward and think about like, okay, what's next? How do I get to what's next? What is the work that I need to do? It's fucking Cozy, dog. So you did your big one with that.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you so much
Thank you.
for that. Even before it was like, oh, well, you know who did Cozy. I was like, and I went look. I said, oh, you that. Can
Yep.
I say that? Is that okay? I don't want to, but you know what?
I feel you. I feel you. No, you got it. I got it.
Get your big one with that.
Yeah.
Ah,
No. Yeah, that you know, um just yeah, that impact again, where it was written from, that was written during the pandemic. And it was written from a place of, at that time, I'm fortunate enough to be working, but I'm literally watching the world fall apart, at the
mhm,
seams. Don't know what's coming, a lot of ways we don't know what's up from down. I'm in a new environment at that. And to kind of frame it musically, my debut album as Dave and Sam, again, the act that got us signed into, to Defected Records and brought me into this writing situation altogether. That Dave and Sam album drops after a 3 week, process, or 3 month process. I'm sorry, 3 week, 3 month, 3 year process.
okay.
That album drops on March 27, 2020, literally the week of of the shutdown. And so what all of this kind of hype and preparation and excitement about what we're going to do next hits a wall, and we have to kind of figure out what we're going to do next from there. And so, um, shout out to again to our ancestors because they will always lead you and guide you. One of the things that I in that moment immediately felt was, okay, take control of what you can take control of. So, what would Gucci do? Right. Shout out so much for making us ask that question. What would Gucci do? Right. What would Wayne do? Right. Some of these, again, folks who just the lesson that I take away from them flooding the game with mixtapes really was just the idea of, okay, I don't have a market, I'll make the market. And so
Absolutely.
for me, my version of that was, okay, any and everybody who's coming to me asking me for a feature or to collaborate or whatever, I'm going for it. No matter who they are, no matter what the budget is, no matter what the topic or the subject matter is, let's just try it. Not realizing that for me, that was for one therapy, right? That's cognitive behavior therapy. I get to basically journal all through the pandemic. But also it's practice and repetition. And so, in the midst of that process of practice and repetition, and literally trying to write my way to some kind of solution or financial solution of my in my situation, um, I find out that again I'm writing towards this idea. Shout out to T.S. Madison. What up, Maddie? I love you. One of our clients at Waves Manufacturing Publishing Co. Also,
Understand it now.
we got this amazing, vocal, her, bitch I'm black vocal. And I am sitting with that and the first version of the production that, becomes Cozy. And that's where that verse was written from. So, even when we get into the rainbow and get into the colors and all of that, this was inspired initially, just to be real about it, not directly, by the trans flag, but actually by the gradient of blackness, because that's what Maddie was speaking to. And so you kind of hear the red like cinnamon and all the different these were lines that were initially used to describe again our complexions and just all of that. So Maddie's concepts made it abundantly clear. And I think that combination of literally trying to write your way, to a place of peace and understanding and, safety and security and comfort, right? Trying to write your way to that. Also with this charge of, self-love and pride and defiance in that pride, even, with the help of Maddie's vocals and just poignant words. I think that's how you get what we got.
Man, that's so crazy. I love Maddie so much. I'm like, this is the Maddie thing. Yeah, I'm like, we friends for it, girl.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, as a father being in the industry, we know
Mhm.
that sometimes time can take up a lot of, and being creative in this space, the hours are different from the normal hours that your children, your wife may have.
Yep.
What has that experience been like? You
Yeah.
know, staying true to yourself, but also navigating, fatherhood and navigating your marriage.
Yeah. So one of the things that um I understood, and again, I think this is definitely probably shout out to neurodivergence, but one of the things that I understood early while trying to juggle two careers,
Mhm.
um, or in certain cases three, depending on how you slice it, was the idea of synchronicity, right? People juggle multiple jobs all the time. What makes it really hard is how far they have to partition, or the level of commitment, their kind of subconscious and the processing power that they have to give to each of these things, and that gets harder over time, and all of that, depending on what's going on with your body and so on. And so early in the game, my understanding was if I can strive for synchronicity in everything that I do, it'll all work out. So, no, there's, well, yes, I can have different multiple jobs or multiple paths of income. There's got to be something that is something consistent that's at least firing the same kind of parts of the brain, right? Certain thinking processes are coming from the same place, and hopefully that will then inform kind of this universal perspective that might be able to guide me through a few different things at one time. And so I looked at parenting in the same way early on. And, shout out to Brooklyn. Brooklyn makes a lot of this stuff easy. Your kids can be at the bar with you at the happy hour. Not saying that we were, drinking all crazy. And having kids, I know that sounds wild to say. You're talking to somebody that probably has a drink a month, if that. But it was more so that the social world of Brooklyn, kids
Yeah.
came everywhere. And it didn't, somebody might have talked about you behind your back, but like, fun infrastructurally, nobody cared. And it definitely didn't mess up. There
Yeah.
was no restrictions. And so early on, it was like, I'm going to studio sessions and bringing my kid with the tablet and with headphones and, building a certain relationship. I can't just do kind of, sporadic pop-ups with folks. I got to build rapport with folks so that they can kind of get comfortable with, my kid and my kid get comfortable with them, things of that sort. And so those types of things early on as I'm trying to figure out social media kind of in, the in the tens, so to speak, or whatever we call that era now.
I don't know
Oh,
that.
no, I guess it's odds, then it's tens, whatever. But as I'm figuring that out, a lot of it was okay. Well, let me get some of my creative ideas out with my kids, and figure out how to intersperse this music and this art, with them. One thing that really helped in that was there was a point, definitely shout out to my wife for helping me kind of come to this conclusion, but also shout out to the kids for helping me come to this conclusion. I never wanted to be the dad. I didn't want to be the dad who your your kids are proud of you, but they either have to kind of hide from your stuff or be hidden from your stuff, or they can't necessarily share it out in the world because
Uh-huh.
of the content matter.
Yeah.
But I also didn't want to be a lame. And so I think so much of the magic of what I've really tried to do as a songwriter and as a creative full stop is create art and create content and create media that says what it needs to say, that expresses whatever kind of agenda I'm trying to express, political or social, whatever it may be, um, while also being something that does not embarrass my wife and kids. Like that's kind of the bar, right? How far can we go and getting these ideas through without embarrassing your wife and kids? And so that kind of became the formula. I think I've mostly done that, to a pretty
You're
decent.
definitely not lame.
You know what I mean? But and I think even with that, there are certain experiences that I have avoided or certain opportunities that I have foregone, without I won't get into deets, but because they don't didn't necessarily fit where I was going in that regard, but also it's about setting expectations, right? I remember being somebody who, having conversations with folks as I am about to become a father and people talking about, yeah, it's going to be tricky because, folks want to just make music at whatever hour. And,
Yeah.
what you going to do when, somebody that's really dope wants to pull up at 1 in the morning and make some music. And while I never took those thoughts too serious, I guess there was a possibility. And I think what I started to learn organically, it wasn't even necessarily, it wasn't a concrete intention, but organically, this was the result. People, I got better at saying, "Hey, we're gonna work together. I got this 3 hours on this day." On this thing, and we're going to make it a regular thing. We can always kind of find this 2 or 3 hours to work in this. And instead of let's just kind of play around the studio and see what happens. It's like we got 3 hours. Let's make
Be
something.
intentional.
Let's make something happen.
Yeah.
And that shift to kind of just not that I was ever somebody who just kind of left it all up to chance per se, but I think a lot of the fears around how kids and families fit into entertainment are rooted in worries about what you're gonna the FOMO, right? Like
Yeah.
what might I be missing out, or what could be coming around that I can't get to or be a part of. And I think what started to happen was, you get certain collaborators, like some of the writers that I work with, a number of them are, parents, or they're married, or they're single parents, or whatever it may be. And,
Yeah.
we're like, hey, 11 a.m. to 2, perfect,
All right.
and you kind of find your niche in that space. And even with that, I think what has been I don't want to say it's a surprise again, but just something that is a kind of a pleasant, like, oh, that's nice how that worked out. A lot of my commitment to maintaining healthy familiar relations, kind of in the midst of all of what this is, and entertainment has kept certain forces, I think, from away from me, right?
Yeah.
People know to only bring certain stuff around me if it, kind of serves me or something that I can, really be a proponent of in that regard. And I think also I have become a bit of a, without necessarily kind of tooting my own horn or how people perceive me. For some people, I'm a safe space,
Yeah.
which has facilitated a lot of business that I may not have actually been able to do if it was solely due to, about hype or about popularity, so to speak. But my kind of combination of, skill, acumen, experience, and then the fact that, there's clearly a bigger purpose here that's beyond, I'm just trying to have a good time in the studio. I think that has absolutely created just a unique lane for me that, I'm really proud to be able to work in and appreciative of.
So with that said, you have debunked certain things, but what's a myth about creativity and or success that needs to like die? Or like,
Um,
yeah,
yes, the first one that comes to mind is that you know overnight success takes decades.
yeah,
Period. Like that's a major one. Usually, anything that we see kind of shock us and come seemingly out of nowhere, uh, you just didn't see the work. It absolutely, came from somewhere. I know everybody's obsessed with an industry plan again because the world is in such shambles that the things that progress were like, yo, it's got to be magic. It's got to be you got to be the child of Christ and have the Orishas behind you, and a couple superpowers to boot, right? Because of just how ghetto Earth is, But I think the reality of it all is, yeah, just that it's you just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening.
yeah. That sounds
And
like the line from like the Santa Claus. Like I don't know why that reminded me of it. Like it's like seeing is believing, all this stuff, and like the magic of everything. And I, not to cut you off, but
no,
I
it's fine. It's
the
fine.
world that we grew up in a different era. We're millennials, right? So we understand work ethic. We understand
Mhm.
putting hard work in, the time in to reap the benefits of
Yep.
what's on the other side of that. And I think that people, because we have social media, it has made the world so much smaller, and we forget
Mhm.
about these other key points of success. I'm currently watching season 2 of Starting Five, and they're talking.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah.
God, it's so good.
Yep.
But you're seeing these athletes, like I think it was like KD said, "Oh, my mom would wake me up in the middle of the night and make me run up the hill." Uh,
Yep.
Somebody else is like, "Oh yeah, once my dad realized that's what I wanted to do, they would, take me outside, they would shoot with me and do all this other stuff and
Mhm.
really push me forward." And people forget about that process, and people making sacrifices to get to where they are. They don't understand
Yeah.
that 'cause it's just so quick. And I think one of the things also as far as music goes, uh, can we bring A&R back? Somebody want to hire me to be somebody A&R. Can we get artist development back? So
Right.
it isn't a shock
Right.
anymore, because I have this episode of the podcast where I'm asking the question: is Taylor Swift is she our last big superstar? Not
Mhm.
that doesn't take anything from Beyonce or anybody else that's out there, but what we see, that phenomena.
Mhm.
We are gonna say something, that's something else.
Of course. You
Uh,
already know.
but that craze that's still behind Taylor Swift all these years later, I
Mhm.
don't know if we'll ever see that again. Like Beyonce just
Yeah.
had, that's a different realm for
Yeah.
us Black people. But I just think that because of what we've seen and how she was like molded and developed. We all know she wanted to be a country singer, and now she's this
Right.
pop star. And we don't see that happen anymore, where it's just like, yeah, I know you want to rap, but I think you can sing. And so Chris Brown,
Right.
we
Right.
don't see that anymore. So I think that a lot of these places have to get back to basics in order to
Mhm.
really. I don't care about no damn TikTok sound. I'm barely on the top.
Right. 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 Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think I won't say so because I have an insane amount of faith in our creativity and in the beauty of humanity, the beauty and the struggle of humanity being something that is infinitely inspirational. Um, I believe that good art will never be at a deficit.
I love it.
Will there be a number of things that will distract us or that will, make it harder to come by? Sure. Will there be, kind of technological changes, right? That make us lose the plot for 5 years or 10 years, and then, until we kind of find our way. Absolutely. That is the nature of this thing. But is are we gonna be okay? We're always gonna be okay. And I think again, there's just too much that lies beneath. And there's too much, even though it gets gate kept, and even though it's definitely institutional knowledge, there's too much, yeah, there's too much knowledge, there's too much understanding, and there's too much soul, I think. Kind of beneath all of this stuff. So even while we're looking at, the lack of artist development because people are just kind of looking, what trend can I pluck or pick up, right? We kind of been teetering around the topic a little bit, saying it without saying it, but take a Doechii, right? The receipts show that this was a kid who had supreme confidence in, her ability and his was practicing in public.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All the way down to the point of, okay, now that I've got my window, what does it look like to do everything that I've always fantasized about
Yep.
doing to
Yep.
execute my vision?
Yeah.
And there's always one of those kids out there,
Yeah.
period. And so what I feel like it happens inevitably, the industry goes through cycles of we don't need any of this stuff because we're trying to save money and cut costs and get a bigger piece of the pie to do these different things. Somebody comes through and knocks all that shit off the table and shows them all of your equations and your analytics don't mean shit up against that kid who
Yeah.
wants it better than everybody else or who
Yeah.
wants it worse than everybody else. And then what happens? The industry shifts around that person and what
Yeah.
they're doing and how they're doing it. And so I actually think that in a lot of ways, we've actually come through a desert. I feel like shout out to Beyonce because Beyonce has been one of these people who has kind of shown us that light. People want to try and dim it for different reasons, and actually a great example too, because in going in different directions or different kind of angle or corners of the audience, right? Bee and her sister, right? Two people who Solange, they both understand or understood the idea of, again, we're just going to take all the resources because now we're supremely confident in our gift and we're going to give you exactly what we intend to give you
Yep.
and show you the steps along the way. Like we don't talk enough about the archival trail that B is leaving or the archival trail that Solange is leaving. And hers is even more like firmly rooted in institutions. But
Yes.
that ability and that insight and intention of not only am I going to show you motherfuckers how it's done, forgive me, but also I am going to leave a trail so that the babies can actually have something to follow if they want to be so ambitious. I feel like those types of spirits have taken us through a desert,
Yeah.
a tech inspired desert. And now we're at a place, I believe, where technology is actually going to allow us to cut some of the execs out of the conversation. And it's going to
Absolutely.
require
Absolutely.
more artist development and more A&Rs to actually deliver or to deliver, to make good on the promise of the talent that I know is being developed, kind of in the wake of where the industry has gone.
Well, I think about Beyonce and Solange, and I think that's the equivalent of knowing your role and staying in your lane. Though
Mhm.
they're disruptors,
Mhm.
but Solange finding her lane and really getting her bag
Mhm.
really shifted everything for her.
Yeah.
And in reading Matriarch, that's Solange. That's been her entire life.
Mm.
And hearing how like Tina, speaks about Solange, and I just think that's so dope to be alive during this time to experience both Beyonce and Solange. And it's
Absolutely.
something that I don't think, not to say that it'll never exist, because I mean, you have Michael and Janet and
Mhm.
other people that are siblings, but I don't think the world will ever get that ever again, just
Nah,
because of the ebb and flow and things.
I believe in.
And maybe, you
Yeah, no.
I don't know, it's just something special about them.
I believe in the power of, knowing that something is possible.
Yeah.
I think about having conversations with my parents about what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I was very typical. I was basic black boy. I'm gonna play basketball and I'm a rap. Now, mind you, this is with a mind for visual art, and this is with the mind for computer programming, and
Yeah.
a number of these different things. But that's what I was going to do. That's what it was. And I remember having the very deflating and analytical talk with my dad. That was like, how many basically, how many high schools are there in Illinois? Get up and find out how many there are. Okay, now multiply that by 50. Okay, now how many kids are on every team? All right, now based on that, and then how many kids get drafted every year in the NBA? Let's do some math, son. And while he, for one, taught me some really great, mathematical, I guess application and
Yeah.
analytical skill through that process, it definitely kind of hit me like, okay, I'm not jumping out the gym, and I haven't hit a growth spurt yet, so you might be right about that. I remember that conversation, and my parents were like, "Well, who's done it? Like, what can we see?" Because when I think of Chicago, I'm thinking of Donny Hathaway, and I'm thinking of Curtis Mayfield, and I'm thinking of, they're going there, and it's like, I'm thinking of Quincy Jones, and is that what you're trying to do? Like, or because we got to learn some instruments. Then, if it was a very, who's done this thing, and so I remember when I first kind of came home, it was like, all right, so there's this rapper that y'all got to hear name Common. And they're like, "Oh, okay. Hmm. And he's in Chicago right now?" And I'm like, "Well, no, actually, rest in peace, D'Angelo. He's in New York, and they got this crew called the Soulquarians, and he's making music with all these other people." "Oh, okay. So he didn't do it in Chicago. He had to go to New York to." "Well, no, he had a start in
Parents.
Chicago, but they're like, yeah, but can you really show us a?" So one thing that they got me in the habit of, even though as annoying as it was, a case study. That's what I understand it as now. At the time, it's just, boomer Midwestern black parents. That's like, look, if it ain't the post office, if it ain't, something with a pension attached to it, if it ain't steady,
Hello.
you need to show me that it can happen. And if you can't show me that it can happen, it didn't happen. And so that was the kind of their angle, and that really made me fall in love with, and I ended up getting a history degree in school. I love a biopic. I love a oral history. I love a just business narratives, creative narratives, artist narratives, whatever it may be. I think that is what the digital information era has unlocked.
Mhm.
YouTube has made all of that possible. It's also brought in a bunch of shenanigans and a lot of now we guess and make assumptions and weird, narratives that where there aren't narratives, right? But
Yes.
at the soul of it, think about what you just shared about, what you just recently watched, right?
Yeah.
About starting five. The access that we now have, that's exposure. And that's
Yeah.
an exposure that makes these things so much more normal,
Yeah.
to where my kids, I think about it, and neither one of them have jumped out there and said, I'm going to be a musician, I'm going to do this or that. They've had different little moments and they joke about having stage names and things like that.
Aw.
But the topics that they discuss, right? They'll say, oh, you got to hear this new song, daddy, you should sign this guy.
Okay.
Oh, how did Baby Chief do it? Put this record out, but it's got the beat from Rick Ross, being like they're able to make those connections now. And I realized that these are things that, again, I had to literally beat the pavement to be able to have not only just knowledge of what it all meant, but I had to, if it wasn't in Vibe magazine and if it wasn't, in a book in the library, I had to meet somebody who was a friend of a family friend, at church, who knew something about somebody to get just a bits and pieces of information. My kids, if they ever decide to activate the gene, they're going to be so well served because they have had the opportunity to watch, people who have, again, gone on to be Grammy winners and nominees, and in certain cases, even household names creatively, to experience them as humans, you know, in daddy's studio or in the basement, or, while sitting at the bar at the happy hour, because, we did all of our stuff together. And so I think that this era of exposure, a lot of what we used to call Nepo babies, I think we're gonna see a lot more YouTube babies that are gonna do some fantastic shit.
Listen, Nepo, like, make me a Nepo baby, okay? I do not. I don't know why, and I know it's like part of like a thing that we do as a culture, where it's like, oh, you got to get it out the mud. I don't want to get it out the mud. I don't want to struggle. I'm all about the network. Somebody, pick up the phone and call, but that's also why networking is so important. And it's so funny because I'm thinking back. Whereas you was like, okay, my parents were rewinding my bed. I was like, man, my mama out here being a dream crusher, y'all. I done told her what I wanted to do. She out here crushing dreams. It's gonna make me go to school because I wanted to take a gap year.
Okay.
I learned about the gap year, and I was like, oh, let me just figure out. I was like, if I'm gonna go to LA or New York, but I really knew I was gonna go to LA.
Yeah.
And after high school, and I was like, I could just take a year and figure it out because I want to act, I want to model, I want to do all this. And my mama said, you leave this house and don't go to school, it ain't no coming back if you fail. You need to go to school. So I was really sad and like, man, how can I get my daddy on this? Because my daddy always gonna back me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I reluctantly enrolled at Webster, and my mom picked out my degree, which is broadcasting.
Yeah.
And I moved to LA, and I had a job when I moved there, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm making good money. So it is I'll figure it out down the line or whatever. Yeah. And it took a while to get my footing and to figure out what next looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And like here I am, somewhat using this broadcasting degree, I've done PR, red carpets and all that stuff, collaborating with people, made so many like new friends during the pandemic, and just never looked back. So it's funny. Right. I guess I can give her a little credit.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mom. You're great.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, because that's the reality, right? Even the dream killing is perspective, you know, and I think it comes in it comes in the form that they know how to, translate. And it's just, it's very easy to be like, oh, you just don't want to see me do this, or you don't think I can do this, or, all these kind of things that we do. But the reality is sometimes and again, I now understand this now that, in a lot of ways, I hear through my kids, I won't claim it, but I hear through my kids and their friends that I'm like a cool dad and that kind of thing. And even in this, I'm grasping for understanding of a 6'7" and of all of these different things. I'm grasping for that understanding. But I think the reality is, your parents are trying to figure out, and all of our parents who are actively, engaged and, trying to kind of go along on this journey of life with us in a healthy way, or as best as possible. They're all trying to figure out how to how to keep the guardrails up, to keep you from falling off the track that they know.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
one of the things that I credit G with, she's always in moments when I found myself being really invested in, I don't want the kids to go down this path or to, do things a certain way because, the world is not going to meet them with whatever that they think that the world is going to meet them with if they keep doing it a certain way or they go hit this wall in life based on how they, a choice that they make. And she was one of the first people that it sounds silly to even doubt this, right? But they hit me with, you ever think about the fact that you might be preparing them for a world that doesn't exist?
Mm, yeah,
And when I tell you that broke my brain so good, I
yeah,
think definitely makes you start to unlearn and kind of unravel, what is, up is now down and down is now up. But that's the reality, right? Like our parents are really, pushing to. I remember my mom not wanting me to wear white tees, which is like,
it's
how the
that
hell did
same
we,
trauma.
how do we get to a place where you can't wear a white shit? James Dean was wearing a white tee, but in her mind, right, there's a route where, you know, the disciples on the corner of 79th Street with the white tees out there, serving the congregation.
Right,
um,
right,
you know, I don't want you going down that route or being mistaken
yeah,
for that, and something as simple as a white t-shirt, something as simple and American and, foundational as a white t-shirt,
yeah,
now means something else that is problematic, right? But she really helped me understand, hey, what if there's a whole world coming that ain't got shit to do with what you knew as life or what we knew as the rules or as whatever? How do you know that they aren't going to be the ones to create the new rules? How do we know that, this whole thing doesn't, you know, turn to shit and they are literally making it right?
yeah,
Um, and I just, as I guess, kind of, you're right, sure. That also is a really revolutionary idea, right? The idea that, yeah, like all these rules are their rules for for the moment, but you don't know what tomorrow holds. And I think, to hell with rules. Like, what's your integrity about? What's your soul about? What's your spirit about? What's your drive about? What's your bounce back and your resourcefulness about? And I think if those things are in place, everything else fundamentally will work
yeah,
itself out in whatever iteration of the future there is. And so, that's the grace that I try and give parents now, particularly of that past generation, because yeah, that they were just trying to figure out how to lay some kind of course that we could ride on.
absolutely. And they were doing the best they had, with, like what
Mhm.
they got in the words of Mariah Carey, but also word to Jahan, because this is why Black women, Black mothers are very important.
Yes, yes, yes.
Regardless of what you might think and what society and the world is trying to tell you and push to you, this is why they are so important. And so
Yeah.
I say that, and I want to end with this question.
Mhm.
What does like the next, 10 to 20 years look like for you musically? Are there people that you are still open to collaborating with? And I know that's a loaded question and it's a big question, but
Absolutely.
give us a little bit. So
Yeah, yeah.
next,
No,
right.
absolutely. So, um, my kids earlier this year said, "Daddy, when you gonna drop some new music? You wash now."
Oh,
And that particularly stung because I think I had just, dropped or was featured on something like a week before they said that, and at which point I'm like, "Damn." But, I think what it really speaks to is that what they have been present for and privy to is, they were part of and actually, yeah, they were a part of the campaign for, my debut album project with Dave and Sam, and in the artwork and in the music videos and incorporated into the storyline and narrative. And, they were present for probably 5 music videos produced, around
mm,
independent album and putting shows together and manufacturing, vinyl record. They were privy to all of that. And
yeah,
so, in a world where my name just pops up on releases on Spotify, and that's that. They're like, "What are you doing out here?" So that definitely lit a fire under me. I never necessarily stopped making music. I'm always creating, and particularly in this season, um, creating in the space of bringing folks together, producing, executive producing, also, intentionally songwriting in a kind of a spirit of surplus, and kind of casting these works out to different producers and kind of trusted places and spaces, to really be proactive, about getting some cool stuff made. But now that I've kind of set that foundation, I'm building a project right now called The Crib tentatively. It is an exploration of the idea that, if we look at, blues music, how that was, truly foundational to what we understood as rock music and eventually pop in a different era of that music industry. Foundational belief that I have that at this point, house music has a very similar, relationship, to what we understand as pop music through the development of all of the diasporic offshoots of dance music that turn into all these different regional ideas. Your bounce, your go-go, your footwork, your techno, Detroit, Chicago, what's happening in different Caribbean sub music genres, all of these things, that once they went electronic, that they are all kind of children of this idea. And with that, I consider myself a descendant of that legacy, for one of just, that Black Chicago legacy of being of all of the all of the roots and source codes of, again, what is foundational to popular music, but also being taking that little streak of kind of innovativeness to fuse it in a very particular way that sets the world on fire. And I believe that my work, in the larger sense now, in the larger kind of canon of pop music, is evidence of that. So that is a project that I am developing now, that ideally, the world will start to see roots of next year, and that will potentially carry us through to 2029. Shout out to planning, being a grown up. And so, as my kids said, 2029, you starve in the streets. It's crazy. But so that's
Kids are hard on you. I love it. They're like, get it
those
together, Daddy.
are my A&Rs, and that's what I tell them. Like, that's my
Do
cheat.
better.
But so that's the short term for my
Okay.
personal artistry. There's Waves Manufacturing Publishing Company. Again, this is what the majority of my time and my efforts have been poured into developing, over the last, now going on 3 years. We're representing just almost 40 artists, Black owned, four male and female executives. I'm sorry, 4 male and 4 female identifying executives, a roster of, that identifies, primarily as, Black, that identifies a third of us as queer, and that is represented all across the world, at this point in time. And so we've made great strides with them, and with building this roster, with establishing trust. We've hit on this really cool premise that, I'll kind of tease without going too deep into the sauce on, of proactive publishing.
Okay.
And, again, this is, if it was something that people wanted to do, they would have done it already, and, we wouldn't have a reason to be here. So I'm never too worried about anybody kind of taking that element of the secret sauce. But it's really the idea that once upon a time, publishing was the result of, I know Scott Joplin. He plays great, music on his piano. I'm going to take his written sheet music, and I'm going to take a trip to New York, and I'm going to shop it around to every theater on Broadway to place his music. That's inherently proactive. Once record labels came to existence, and you had the dynamic of they own the master recording versus who owns the composition. Essentially, if the record labels or the larger companies cannot control both sides, it's not a priority. And the vast majority of even the independent publishing business is rooted in essentially indie shops that are back-ended by major label interest. And so when I say vast majority, we're talking over 90%. And
Okay.
so for us, we're looking at, okay, this is the case across independent music, period. But specifically, nobody is talking to Black folks, brown folks. They're not talking to women. They're not talking to queer artists about equity, partnership, ownership,
Yeah.
and how to give them more tools and more visibility into all of what they have. We've just recently entered into a pretty groundbreaking partnership with Vidya, which not a household name as a company, and also not NVIDIA, because every time I talk to a Black person of a certain age about this, they're like, "Oh, I know about them computer chips," and I'm like, "No."
No, no.
But in short, Vidya is the distribution platform behind, some of the recent years' largest kind of runaway successes, a Sexy Red, to bring it to St. Louis, right?
Okay.
Supported by Gamma on the kind of independent label partnership front, but the digital infrastructure and back end of that is this platform, Vidya. And so they are a boutique invite only platform that gives, again, the highest level of kind of white glove service and visibility into your accounting and into your performance that is only usually reserved, again, you mentioned like a Mariah Carey, for your Mariahs and for your Beyoncés in the major label system. We have now unlocked that for any and every independent artist who comes to our door, regardless of what their stature is. And
I love it.
so that to me is a landmark moment that I'm thrilled about because, again, it's about access, it's about awareness, and it's about education. And we believe that being able to unlock that will absolutely be fuel to scale the business, fuel to really push independent artists to expect more and desire more and to have the bandwidth now to not be worried about certain things and to be able to just lock in and go make everybody think that they're an industry plant because of how dope they are. And so, um, so that's a big piece of it. I know that's a lot, but that is something that I believe will absolutely that again, what we've built and where we're going with that is going to unlock a journey that I think is my forever endeavor in terms of collaborating with musicians, building with them, again, establishing, you know, people's, again, we're talking about people's personal legacies, but also this is their estates, right? Intellectual property. This is literally people's creative estate. And so thinking about the life cycle of this thing and really being able to grow it on that level is something that I think that, will be my next 20 years and beyond. And in the midst of that, you the last bit you asked, who do I want to work with, or is there anybody else? On my initial list in 2018, when I again, shout out to G for really just putting this kind of thinking on my heart. Planning and mood boarding and kind of, claiming what is going to be and what you're going to do for yourself. I absolutely said that I was going to collaborate with Beyonce on there. I said that I was going to collaborate with Jay-Z on there. I said that I was going to get nominated for a Grammy. I said that I was going to work with Chance the Rapper, which I know may kind of seem like a jump, like be the Chance, but like the Chicago, you know what I'm saying? And
It
uh,
makes sense to me. It makes total complete sense to
you
me.
know what I mean? The
Yeah,
spirit,
know that.
spirit believes he's like my nephew, and I don't even know him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Chance, and then also Spike Lee. These were all,
This was talking about Spike Lee.
you know,
Literally 20 minutes before we jumped on here. That's funny.
listen, that was absolutely, those are the goals. And so checked a few of those off already.
Okay.
I'll even settle for
Settle. What's that
what
mean?
I know, right? I was like, I'll even count the Jay-Z allowing, for one of my verses to end up on, his wife's project, to count as a form of collaboration with Hove. But yeah, I would love to see, um, if there's a world where Chance and I are able to interact. One of the ones that I had on there that now at this point I'm completely over, but there was a period where I was dead set on. I was like, I'm going to help Kanye create the Gospel House album that he's always wanted to create, and it's gonna be hip. It's gonna be fun. but it's also going to be mature, and it won't embarrass his kids or his mama or anybody else any more than some of his instincts already do. And I was dead set on being that guy. And then yeah, a few of these mishaps down the road, I'm just like, all right, it's over, bro. You got it.
I am so over it. I mean, I thought I was gonna marry Kanye. That was on my picture.
Hey,
I love him. Like, I feel like we have this connection. He's like an air sign too. And then I was like, yeah, I'm over that.
Yeah.
So over it. I hate that for him.
There we go. There we go.
Because I'm that girl, but I think that's dope. I don't think you're settling reach for the stars, and you seem to have like a very solid foundation, a very dope and great support system. Shout out to Solange, not Solange. Shout out to Solange, but shout out to Jeff
right
from the little. And it's just been amazing to watch her and her sister. I've known them since we were kids, and just blossom and grow like such beautiful souls. Always have been.
Absolutely.
But seeing them in this chapter and just watching has just been beautiful. And listen, you got it. This is nothing. This is easy because you have the plan, and now you know what execution looks like. You understand patience and timing.
Yes.
So that's why I was like, 20 years.
Yeah.
Though that seems far, it's so close.
It happens it can happen so fast. I mean, I look at right now, I'm like, there's no way it's 2025.
No way. Well, 2020 to now, it's like, well, honestly, and this, I swear I'm not kissing your butt. It wasn't for Beyonce in that project. Like, everything just would have been like a blur. People are like, oh, what do you remember? I said, I don't know, but I know when Act 1 happened, something happened. And I think about the concept of how she said she was initially going to release that country album first and then switched it just because of the state of the world. Thanks, y'all. We appreciate you a lot for bringing joy because, like you said, I didn't know what was happening. The world was in this crazy dark abyss. We didn't know, like, we were losing people left and right, and the world needed joy, and you were able to provide us with that. So I'm very blessed and thankful that you have come here to have this conversation with us and just give us a little insight into your life, because it's just not about Beyonce. It is just that's just a moment on your timeline that happened. And that was for you, and this also speaks to guys like being intentional, setting your intention and revisiting that and having it somewhere where you can see it, where oh my God, like, I cannot believe this happened. But it was for you. That was God. God had that coming for you, and understanding that it brings a level of peace that no one, like, what that feels like. So I thank you again so much for being here and giving me a moment of your time, and tell everybody where they can connect with you on socials.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before I do that, I just want to thank you. I appreciate you. I love the platform. I love the show. Y'all always give me a mixture of insight and, entertainment, laughs, and also care and concern, and a little bit of snark and a little bit of shade. And I think we all need that balance in our lives. And so, I want to thank you for seeing, my path as story worthy and as, worthy of sharing, and amplifying that. So thank you, in that. So definitely, as far as where to find me, Dave Giles II everywhere. So on social, that's Dave Giles. It's going to look like Dave Giles II or Dave Giles E, but that's the second for those of y'all that don't know a Roman numeral. And
that's why we have to get Han on here so we can talk about literacy, because a lot of people read.
A lot of
reading comprehension.
A lot of people can't read. I mean, a lot of people can read. A lot of people can't comprehend. So, Dave Giles II on all of the social platforms, the website, DaveGiles2nd.com. Also, my company, Waves Manufacturing. We spell that WVZ MFG. That's might look like a crazy abbreviation or even a
It makes sense to me because I can read and I
even
can
a
comprehend.
yeah. Thank you. I'm like people act like it's an airline confirmation code, and I'm like, nah. Waves Manufacturing, because we are manufacturing the next wave of music, simply put. And you can find that anywhere, wvzmfg.com, as well as on all the social handles at wvzmfg. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will see you guys back here next week.
Take care.